right. Hello. Back for part two. I better get snappy here. This is going to be a lot snappier than the last one. Got a lot to cover. So to recap, part one was mostly about describing what the two topmost cognitive functions in ENFP, what they do. That would be extroverted intuition in the dominant position and introverted feeling in the auxiliary position in the ENFP type. And I'm about to start borrowing very heavily from Eric Strauss of the channel Talking with Famous People. I really love, he is an ENTP, so he and I share the same dominant cognitive function and the bottommost one. And I love what he has to say about ENFP. I appreciate it very deeply. I'm going to explain why. But anyway, what he says, he has his own, like so many MBTI autodidactic nerds out there do. It seems he's had a couple of add-ons to the Myers-Briggs temperament indicator system to sort of give little handles, little tabs to the system to make it easier to understand and easier to grasp and maybe a bit easier to use. And I've noticed that, I don't know if he got this from somewhere else. I haven't been able to track down where this comes from. If he didn't make it up, maybe he made it up. I don't know. But what he's done is he's associated with each of the 8 cognitive functions these little labels for, it's just awesome. It's really funny. He's divvied them up into according to classifications of their functions, the functions of the functions. So that is how these cognitive functions translate into action. In a way, that's kind of what it suggests. That's not essentially what it's about, but anyhow. So he says, for example, that introverted sensing, for example, is a regulate function. Its big purpose is to regulate things. He says of TI, introverted thinking function, that is a render function. That's what it does. He says of, I think it is SE, the SE function, he says that's a get function. And he says of our dominant cognitive function, extroverted intuition, that it's a disrupt function. It's a disruptor, or he says in one of his videos that I love about ENFP, he says it's a messin' with function, or an exploration function is how it's often put. And that's true. This function's purpose is to explore. It is to explore far and wide and in all kinds of strange places that most people do not think to look at. Someone with dominant extroverted intuition in their cognitive stack, that would be ENTPs and ENFPs, a huge driving force for us that we cannot turn away from is to experiment and explore in very novel and unusual ways things that are in our external environment. And on a quest for meaning, this is what would make us different from, say, people who have, like ESFPs, who have quite a bit in common with ENFPs. ESFPs have as their dominant function extroverted sensing. So they're all about exploring to the fullest the actual tangible reality that can be experienced through the 5 senses. That's what those people are driven to see about in life. And what the ENFP is driven to see about in life, and what the ENTP and ENFP are seeking in their explorations. You can think of a lot of what we are doing mentally in a day with our apparently useless, and in fact, yeah, it's a lot of the stuff that we do is we are on one big, gigantic, lifelong research mission. I think that's a really good way to understand what we're up to. And I know that if I probably would be welcome for some people who have to deal with us to have a bit of a guide as to what in the hell we're doing. Because I know at this point I'm a middle-aged, so I've been exposed to quite a lot of disapproval, quite a lot of misunderstanding, quite a lot of confusion, quite a lot of put-downs, quite a lot of crap. for me doing what comes naturally according to my dominant function. And I've come to learn that it is really not obvious to most people what the point is of a lot of what I'm spending so much energy on. The thing is, I'm going to try, if you want to, I'm going to try and help those of you who are very different from ENFPs and ENTPs to have a little bit of an idea of what we're doing. The thing is, because we are so driven to explore, and that would be ideas. ENFP and ENTP are, the S-dominant, SE-dominant types are interested in like lived, physical, tangible, sensual experience. We are interested in those things too, to some degree, but mainly what really gets us going and what we're really friskily hunting all around for is a playground of ideas. And in the case of ENFP, ENTP will lean more towards abstraction. Most ENFPs like abstract thinking too, and do some of it to a fair bit of it. But what we're really driven, the kind of meaning that we are especially built for trying to find and for exploring our entire lives, every day of our lives, is that having to do with that it can be associated with our value systems, or can be associated with meaning in a very humanistic kind of sense, in a very big picture, meaningful, transformative, catalytic sense. That is what we find all kinds of other things along the way, because that's what NE is. It's a messing with function. It's a running around, exploring in a very free manner, in a very non-prioritized manner in many cases, which again can be a good thing or can be a bad thing. It really depends on the nature of the task you're trying to meet, but it sure is what we are doing, whether we like it or not. And it is something we have to do. It is our operating system, if you like. If you want to use that analogy for understanding the sort of power and purpose and influence of the different cognitive functions in a given personality type's cognitive function stack, extroverted intuition is the ENFP and the ENTP's operating system. So that's why we're here, is to mess shit up. And again, I think we are starting to see, able to articulate why it is that there are quite a few people that think ENFPs and ENTPs, perhaps especially the ENFPs, are some of the shittiest people around, because we confuse a lot of people. And a lot of people don't understand what's going on, and furthermore, don't want to understand what's going on. For those of you who do want to understand what's going on, I would really like to try and explain it to you to the best of my abilities, and also to grow in my capacity of being able to explain it properly to myself and to others. And the Myers-Briggs temperament indicator has been indispensable for this. Holy cow. So that's what we're driven to do. We're driven to, in a very free-for-all manner, every sense of that phrase, to go running around and looking all over the place. And we know that, and this kind of behavior and thrust of existence can look extremely, can really baffle a lot of other types, because the way most other people operate is they sort of set out, like they don't move until they have a goal in mind. And then once they have the goal, they make the plan to that goal, and then they follow the plan to that goal. And it's a more or less linear progression, and the actions are thought out before you get there. With the dominant intuition, we're not doing that at all. We're going to be very light on the planning, especially being P types. We're going to prefer the research, the information gathering. We are leading with an information gathering function. It is a very, very imaginative and creative thinking function, and it is disruptive. It's disruptive. It's very innovative, and it's has a very strange approach to things. It is very improvisational. It's very high energy. It's very, it's bouncy and it's playful. That's another defining feature of it. It's a very, very playful function. So a lot of people don't care for that. They don't see what the point is. They don't like it. For us, we are running around discovering all kinds of things because, first of all, number one, we can't help it. That's already covered, as you see above. Number two, because that's the way we gather information, we have been rewarded for us. The whole journey is an end in itself. That's a very key thing to understand as well, or to try and understand, I guess, if you want to try and understand us at all. The journey is the purpose. And as we're journeying and finding out and looking in all kinds of strange places and coming up with inventive ways of interacting with the environment and objects in the environment, we're learning things, and we learn for its own sake. We enjoy learning for its own sake. And what we very often find is that what we have learned or discovered about something, are covering a lot of ground rather shallowly, we find that things are useful later, and that we found out. Now, not even most of what we find out is useful to other people. It's fun and worth something to us just by dint of our love for experience. We need novelty, and we're very stimulating, and we really need to be stimulated mentally. So, this running around and inventing and trying things on and trying things out and trying different approaches to finding stuff out just comes naturally for us, and it's what we do. And we like to do it, and we enjoy the ride, and most of the time, we get ourselves into some very sticky situations sometimes, which is a whole other matter, but that's how we do it. And very often when you find us to be sparkling company, again, for those of us for people who might think we're just being ridiculous or we're just wasting time, well, matter of opinion. Yeah, I guess you could say definitely there's a lot of time wasted, but a lot of us feel that it was time well wasted, and a lot of us feel like it'll be a lot of fun to think of on our deathbeds, all the silly things that we did, and we also find out a bunch of interesting stuff that's quite surprising, and that sometimes can be put to use later. All of a sudden we'll be presented with a problem that requires some very divergent, creative, innovative thinking, and some strange bits of knowledge could be useful in a given situation. And what we were researching very informally, just very naturally and powerfully on our own, just doing what our dominant function does years before, will find a use later on. So again, I don't mean to, I find this is probably the FI in me speaking here, the very individualistic, deeply felt kind of part of me that's in my auxiliary function. But not that I feel the need to sort of justify my journey, but I think sometimes it can be justified. Sometimes what we have to offer is to a project or to a solution is just the thing that nobody else could have come up with. And so that's it. So that's any. Now, so there we go. We have this so-called disruptor function that is running our show. Okay. Now let us turn to the auxiliary function, the second in command, that which is very powerful within the cognitive stack, very influential, inescapable in its influence upon the personality and what that personality affects, but less powerful than the dominant function. This is FI. Now, so here we have the disrupting, shit disturbing, playful, leaping around, going all sorts of places. It's kind of naughty and it's not supposed to be going, but then finding out all kinds of interesting things because it did function, running the show. Then we have, on the other hand, this incredibly emotionally intense, extremely emotionally sensitive, not as emotionally sensitive as for the ISFPs or the INFPs who lead with the introverted feeling function, but we have it in the auxiliary. It's pretty powerful. It's there. Frankly, it's a pain in my ass constantly. I'll just say it. I find that both my function, so I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. So you've got this very values oriented, doesn't want to take a step unless it feels that it's in line with those values, feels an imperative to be true to the value system that it sounds kind of snooty, I don't know, but by other accounts I've read about ENFP descriptions, a relatively evolved, what you call an evolved value system. It's something that has been, not to say that all ENFPs have an evolved value system, but all ENFPs feel their value system. Let's put it that way. It might be a value system that's developed in a strange sort of way, or it's a bit warped or what. I'm not going to make some claim that ENFPs are a bunch of secret saints out there, because that ain't the case. That's not true. But They are people who feel things very intensely on the emotional level, and they are people, whether you see it or not, and they are people who cannot escape the edicts, feeling the edicts of their own value systems. It's a constant thing that you can't get away from. And often you wish you could. In my case, sometimes I wish that I could, and I really do envy my ENTP friends, for example, or INTP friends who can live in the world of concepts and really give themselves, they have the stuff for it. They've got the raw material and the raw talent to really develop. It's already there. Plus they're just so, oh God, I just think how delightful it must be to have that much brain power and intellect, just pretty much unmoored from, most of the time from thinking about other people and their feelings and thinking about their own feelings, like just not really a big thing most of the time. It must be so nice to, excuse me, so very nice. Anyway, so perhaps you're starting to see some problems, some strangeness here. I think this is part of the reason why when ENFPs are hated, or when people feel that ENFPs are crazy or that they can't be understood, I think it's because people don't have access to this model and what it can teach us. And they don't have a basis. It's easy to understand why they don't understand, because it's talk about a weird pairing of big influences in a personality, huh? I mean, the image that came to me today thinking about it is it's kind of like, it's really awful. It's kind of like, like when have you ever watched a water skier who's lost their skis, lost their footing, and they're being dragged behind a speedboat through the water, for like a painful whatever it is, until the driver of the speedboat realizes that the skier, they need to slow down because the skier is no longer upright. That's how it frickin' feels to me to be an ENFP, with this sort of speedboat of a shit disturbing, never stopping, never resting, just restless doesn't even begin to cover it as an adjective. Mind with dominant function that's just running around and just messing shit up all over the place all the time, and just endlessly curious and endlessly driven to ask what next, what's this, what's that. Let's take this thing from over here that has no bearing on this thing, and let's slam them together, let's mash them up and see what happens. Like, just, running around. And then you've got this auxiliary function that's very that's feeling things all the time, and also is constricted by having to check in with that powerfully felt value system stuff all the time. Ugh. I feel like the FI is the water skier that's fallen off the skis, and it's just getting dragged behind. It's getting dragged behind the speedboat a lot of the time. That's how it feels for me, anyway. So, I'm going to turn to Eric Strauss again, because he did this video that means so much to me. And I'm going to put a link to this video as well as some other excellent ones that I think really help I think it would really help ENFPs to understand themselves better and give them more of a vocabulary and a conceptual framework for explaining what we're about to other people, because it really isn't obvious. Or rather, half of it is really, the NE stuff is really, really obvious. It's very obvious to the rest of the world. But then there's this other part that's half as powerful, but still really damn powerful, that that is very complex and very intense and is very interiorly focused, and only is seen, sometimes the only way you can even see what's happening with it is to kind of look at these downstream effects that are kind of out of the way, about which there isn't very much fanfare. So it's you need a map. Of course you need some definitions, and you need a bit of a map to sort it out and to figure out what the hell is going on with this person. So Eric Strauss made this wonderful and it's so great coming. Anyway, sorry. This video he made is called ENFP. It's the title. ENFP. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just, of course, called to me. I think we called any ENFP because we get a lot of shit. And again, I'm not going to try and argue that we shouldn't have any shit, or that everyone should think we're wonderful and we're adorable and great, because no, we're a lot. That's a fact. We are a lot. And not everybody wants that a lot. And that's okay, that's okay. Yeah. And what he was saying in there basically is he said that ENFP it was wonderful too coming from an ENTP, because I know when he says he understands about what it's like to live with dominant extroverted intuition, of course he really, 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 and inferior SI, he really does know. And I think ENTPs and ENFPs have quite a lot in common. And I certainly know I get a hell of a lot. I have a riot with my ENTP friends. It's very easy to have a very good conversation and a very zippy, funny, fun, stimulating conversation with those people. And anyway, but then, they're not known for being that cuddly, the ENTPs. So to be getting this sort of, out of all of those videos that guy makes, to be getting one that's kind of in his sort of cold fish, rational kind of way, but a cheerleading video for the ENFP, I really appreciated it. And what he was saying in there is that the ENFP, in his opinion, is one of the few types that is very, very conflicted. In which you've got, and he just had, just go see the video, ENFPs, if you haven't, just go see it. It's really great. And he explains how it is that within the cognitive stack of the ENFP type, you've got two major conflicts going on all of the time. And his thesis in this is basically to describe the nature of what those conflicts are, and then to say to us, look, it is not going to be easy for you guys. It's going to take a long time to sort that out, because that's a lot to manage, and it's very confusing and difficult, and it's very, very, very difficult for ENFPs to find balance in their lives and in their minds. And but when he ends on a very encouraging note too, and he also explains, he says, what though, I've seen it in the ENFPs in my life and whatever, that if you can, he said, it's probably going to come late in life. It's probably going to come after a lot of trial and error and a lot of embarrassing, my words, not his, but, some embarrassing and strange and, trials and tribulations, many of which you probably won't want to talk about later. You hope people will forget, but, in your exploration. But he said, if you can manage to get a grip on those things and find the kind of the right situations for yourself where the dominant and auxiliary function in particular are not a giant pain in your ass at all times, then he's like, you're going to be golden. You're going to be a superhero because wow, if you can do that, then it's going to be brilliant. And I think he's right, actually. If you can take this kind of latitude of abilities that ENFP has, if you can take this latitude of abilities and very divergent qualities that this personality type has, and if you can somehow find a healthy balance so that the things that are powerful can be expressed to the right degree, in the right times, in the right situations, more often than not, and if your physical health is you're not running yourself ragged with all of your crazy ideas and you're running around and so on, you can find balance that way. If you can find balance in your expression so that you don't go around either like attracting too many people to you or repelling too many people from you with your over-the-top passion and zaniness and your hyperactivity, if that happens to be a thing for you. I mean, if you can take that, and you might end up with a very, very, again, very passionate and very sort of values-centered, affectionate, warm, funny, fun companion and catalyst for change for people. A real champion, a real advocate for some worthwhile causes. But it does. I think it does understandably take a long time and a lot of trial and error for most ENFPs to get to that point. So that was the first reason why I think those cognitive functions is such a strange combo. And I think what ends up happening with ENFP is that people will readily notice the dominant function. It's got an extroverted attitude, and it's a brassy, brash, unusual, weirdo function. It's a balls out, weirdo, kind of all over the place thing. and people are going to see it, and they do. And it's also very energetic. So I think that what happens is people will often mistake an ENFP for their dominant function, and they won't see the other stuff that's going on there. I think that FI, being such a different animal from extroverted intuition, I think that and then also being introverted in its nature, I think that all the introverted functions are harder to see. They're more complex. They're more internal, et cetera, et cetera. There's more subtle stuff going on with them that's not easy to discern from the outside. But it's also the case that I think FI gets hugely overshadowed by NE, because NE is not just, ENFPs aren't just distractible. NE is distracting. It really, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot of color and motion and talking and flurry of this and that. And so, yeah, I know that, for example, a lot of people in my life have said to me, they think that they have the mistaken notion that I'm just always of a pretty good mood, and most people would find it hard to believe that I could have ever been depressed in my life. And I have been. And most people find that hard to believe because for one thing, they'll mistake high energy for being happy. Just as shyness has nothing necessarily to do with introversion, being of high energy doesn't necessarily have to do with not feeling sad, not feeling melancholic. And this is another video that I'm going to put a link to in the bottom. And there are a few people out there that I think have gotten the ENFPs just, as far as I'm concerned, I think they really got our number. They really got it right in describing some really key things about us. And one of them is Michael Pierce's, one of his 16 type profile series. The one about ENFP, I think, is fantastic. And one of the things that he talks about, again, please go see it if you haven't seen it already. If you are an ENFP, go see it. It's wonderful. And one of the things I really appreciate about what he did in there is he did not at all overlook the FI influence stuff, nor the other parts, even lesser parts. But the FI part of being the part of the ENFP that most of the world doesn't see very much of. It really is a very melancholic side of us, most ENFPs. The thing is, when we're feeling emotions that are, this is really putting a waspy spin on it, but, that are difficult emotions. So sadness, grief, what will come out of us quite easily is, irritation, anger, exuberance, happiness. Those things will come out. And they'll come, again, like anyone who knows any ENFPs, that very, very well. But the emotions that you wouldn't necessarily always want to talk to just anybody about, the sad feelings and the uncertainties and the melancholic stuff. Or also, I find too, when I'm very touched by something, when anything that would make me cry, anything that would get me choked up. What I notice in looking around at all my INFJ friends and my ENFJ friends and my and other friends that have the FE is that those people are able to have their emotions, those kinds of emotions. And it almost seems like a miracle to me how you guys are able to just calmly talk through it like it's nothing. Like you can sort of, like, I know you're feeling your stuff, and I know that you are. And I also know that in your quiet moments away from everybody, there's a hell of a lot happening, and there's a hell of a lot happening upstairs, even that none of us are ever going to see. We're never going to know about it. But it kind of amazes me how the ENFJ and the INFJ can be in these really emotionally intense situations and be completely articulate. I cannot.